the time the speeches were done and the dessert table was picked clean, I was the one standing in the corner of the Hendersons' dining room, holding someone else's jacket and trying to remember which table I had been assigned to. That was pretty much how every one of Nadia's family events went. I was always there, never quite placed, just somewhere between guest and furniture. Nadia and I had been friends for 6 years. We met at Ryerson in second year, in a marketing class where the professor assigned us to the same group project and we both showed up on the first day with the same color-coded notebook system. She thought it was funny. I thought it was efficient. We argued about it for 40 minutes in a Tim Hortons on Dundas, and by the time she finished her coffee, she had my number and had already texted me 3 times. 6 years later, I was standing in her aunt's house in Mississauga for her cousin Petra's wedding reception, holding a jacket that belonged to someone named Derek, who had asked me to watch it 20 minutes ago and never came back. Nadia appeared at my elbow without warning, the way she always did. "You look like you're guarding something." "I am." "Derek's jacket. I don't know who Derek is." She looked at the jacket. "That's my uncle's. He does this at every family thing. Just leaves things with whoever is nearest." She took the jacket from me and draped it over an empty chair. "You've been promoted. You're no longer Derek's coat check." "What am I now?" "My date to the dessert table. There's a second round coming out, and my cousin Petra doesn't know I know about it. And if we don't move in the next 4 minutes, the aunties are going to get the good butter tarts." I followed her because I always followed her, and because the butter tarts at this specific family's events were legitimately the best thing I had eaten in this province. Nadia moved through her family the way water moves through a crowded room, easily, without effort, finding every gap before it closed. She hugged her grandmother near the kitchen doorway. She fixed her cousin Marcus's tie while walking past him. She said something quiet to Petra that made Petra's face go soft and relieved. She did all of this while also steering me toward the dessert table in the back corner of the dining room without ever losing the thread of the conversation we were having about whether the speeches had been too long. "They were too long," I said. Marcus cried. "You can't time limit a speech that made someone cry." "Marcus cries in insurance commercials." "That is not the point." She stopped at the table and handed me a plate. The second round of desserts had just been set out. Butter tarts, non-amo bars, something with cranberry that looked ambitious. She put 2 of everything on her plate with the efficiency of someone who had been to many family functions and learned not to hesitate. Across the room, her mother caught my eye and smiled, not at Nadia, at me. Then she looked between us in a way that made me study the Nanaimo bars very carefully. Nadia's family had been doing this since about year 3 of our friendship. It started with small comments, her aunt asking if I was seeing anyone, her grandmother calling me Nadia's young man without any apparent intention of correcting herself. By year 4, it had graduated to nudges. By year 5, her cousin Marcus had started referring to me as basically family, in a tone that made it clear he considered this a statement of fact and not opinion. I had developed a reliable strategy for dealing with it, which was to laugh and redirect and keep things moving. It worked well. I was very good at it. "Liam." Nadia's mother materialized beside me with the quiet efficiency of someone who had spent decades appearing exactly where she was most needed. "Mrs. Okafor." "I keep telling you, Sandra." "Sandra." She looked at me with the expression she saved for things she found both obvious and charming. "You are good with people, you know. Very easy in a room." She glanced toward Nadia, who had drifted a few steps away to intercept Marcus before he could take the last cranberry thing. "She is the same. It's interesting how people who are good in rooms always find each other." "We found each other in a marketing class." "Yes," she said pleasantly, "and here you are, at a family wedding, holding a plate." She patted my arm. "Enjoy the tarts." She left. I ate a butter tart and tried not to think about what she'd meant. I was very good at that too. The reception moved the way receptions do, in waves of energy and noise and then sudden quiet patches when most people were in the same conversation somewhere else. By 10 o'clock, the main crowd had relocated to the living room for dancing, and the kitchen had become its own separate event. Nadia's grandmother and 2 aunts occupied the kitchen table like a council. 3 of Petra's university friends were taking up the counter by the sink. Nadia's younger brother, Sophie, was sitting on the floor near the fridge, eating his 3rd piece of cake directly off the serving knife, because apparently that was the kind of night it was. Nadia and I ended up near the back door, leaning against the wall in the narrow space between the pantry and the hallway, which had somehow become the quietest spot in the house. She had taken her heels off and was holding them by the straps, which she always did at hour 3 of any event. She was an inch shorter without them. I noticed this every time and never mentioned it. "How's the new project going?" she said. "The one with the Vancouver client." Slowly, they want something minimal and they also wanted to say everything. Those two things are not compatible. Tell them that. I did. They said they trusted my judgment, which means they want me to figure out how to make it compatible. She smiled into her glass. Classic. How's your thing? The budget thing. She exhaled. Still a thing. My manager keeps asking me to justify line items that she approved 2 months ago. I'm going to start sending her her own emails as reference, with the original approval highlighted in yellow, with the note. What kind of note? She looked at me. The professional kind, obviously. Obviously. We stood there for a moment in the comfortable way we had developed over 6 years of finding the quiet corner at every event and debriefing the room like it was something we'd watched together instead of lived. Outside, through the small window above the pantry, the backyard lights were on over Petra's carefully arranged outdoor seating area, which nobody had used because it was October in Ontario, and Ontario in October had opinions. Nadia's glass was almost empty. She tilted it to get the last of it and said, without looking at me, "Marcus asked me last week if you and I were going to figure things out before I move." I kept my expression neutral. Figure what out? You know what? I don't actually. She looked at me then. One of her direct looks, which meant she had decided not to dance around something. "He thinks we're going to get together eventually. He's been thinking it for years. Apparently half my family has a timeline. Your mom mentioned something about rooms. She does that. What did you tell Marcus?" She was quiet for a beat. Not dramatic, just honest. The way she went quiet when she was choosing her words instead of just sending them. I said that wasn't really something I was thinking about. Something in my chest settled in a way that was trying to pass itself off as relief. "Good," I said. "Me neither." That was a lie. Not the largest lie I had ever told, but it was in the top 5, and I had said it smoothly enough that I almost believed it for a second, which was the real problem. Nadia nodded once and looked back toward the window. "I'm in Vancouver for at least 2 years, maybe more, depending on how the role goes. So it's a moot thing anyway." "When do you leave?" "February, right after the long weekend." I knew this. She told me 3 weeks ago over takeout pho on her couch. I knew the date, the airline, the name of her new team lead. I had helped her compare 2 different apartment listings in East Vancouver on my laptop while she sat on the floor with the floor plan printouts. I knew all of it. I still had not figured out what to do with the fact that her leaving felt like something being taken out of my life that I had never admitted was there. We were still near the back door 20 minutes later when her cousin Sophie came into the kitchen from the hallway with the very specific energy of someone who had been at the wine table for 1 glass longer than intended. Sophie was 24, finishing her last year of a communications degree, and had never in her life kept a thought inside her head for more than 8 seconds. She was also, according to Nadia, the family member most likely to say the true thing at the wrong time, usually at a family function, usually near the end of the night. She saw us standing there and pointed. "Good, both of you. I need to tell someone this because I've been holding it for months, and Petra is busy being married." "Sophie," Nadia said, in the voice she used when she was trying to redirect without seeming like she was redirecting. I know, I'm going to keep it short." Sophie turned to me with the unsteady confidence of someone who had decided their honesty was doing the world a favor. "Nadia made me swear not to say anything, but she's moving in February and someone needs to say something, so." She took a breath. "She turned down a promotion in Calgary last year because Calgary is too far. She also turned down that guy Adrian because she said he was, and I'm quoting, fine, but not the kind of person she'd want to talk to at the end of a weird day." Sophie. "And the reason I know what that means is because I know who she calls at the end of weird days." Sophie pointed at me with her glass. "So, just someone needed to say that." Then she turned and walked back toward the dining room with the calm of someone who had delivered a message and considered the matter resolved. The kitchen kept going around us. Nadia's grandmother lapped at something at the table. Someone dropped a fork. The music from the living room pressed through the walls. I did not look at Nadia. I was looking at the window, and I was doing the thing I had trained myself to do, which was to find a reasonable explanation for what I had just heard that did not mean what it obviously meant. Sophie was dramatic. Sophie had been at the wine table. Sophie had, on at least 2 previous occasions, decided something was true, because she wanted it to be true. I tried 3 of those explanations in approximately 4 seconds and none of them worked. I turned to Nadia. She had her eyes closed, not dramatically, just the way you close your eyes when something you were hoping to manage has just unmanaged itself completely. How much of that, I said, was accurate? She opened her eyes and looked at the counter. She's not great with context. That's not a denial. She was quiet. Nadia. Liam. She said my name the way people say it when they're asking for a second before they say the thing they've been not saying. Can we not do this in the middle of my cousin's wedding reception? Nobody's in this part of the kitchen. My grandmother is 12 feet away. She's been in the same conversation for 45 minutes. She's not listening to us. Nadia looked at me and there was something in her face that I didn't know how to read, which was unusual. I could usually read her. That was the thing about spending 6 years as someone's closest person. You learn the difference between their versions of fine. I knew when she was tired versus overwhelmed. I knew when her smile was real versus performed. I knew which laugh meant she found something funny and which one meant she was buying time. But this look I didn't have a category for. Let's go outside, she said. The backyard was cold in the specific way that October in Ontario is cold, not brutal yet, just decided. The patio string lights were on, but the heaters were off and the carefully set outdoor chairs were still empty. Nadia had put her heels back on for the transition from the back door to the patio stones. She crossed her arms not defensively, just because it was cold, and she'd left her wrap inside. I stood across from her with my hands in my jacket pockets and waited. Sophie wasn't wrong about the promotion, she said. Calgary was a good offer. My manager thought I should take it. I didn't. And one of the reasons I didn't was geography. Yeah. One of the reasons. She nodded slowly. There were others. I liked my team here. I was in the middle of a project. It felt too fast. Okay. But Calgary also would have put me 7 hours away from my family. And from you. And I told myself that was just practical. You're my person. Moving that far from my person didn't make sense. My person. She said it the way you say something you've said 100 times internally and only realize sounds different out loud when it's already out. The Adrian thing, I said. She exhaled a small breath into the cold air. That one's harder. You don't have to. No, I want to be honest, since apparently Sophie decided tonight was the night. She looked at the patio stones. Adrian was good. He was kind and smart and genuinely interested, and we had good conversations. There was nothing wrong with him. That was almost the problem. He was fine, and I kept waiting to feel the thing, and I didn't. What thing? She looked up at me. The thing where talking to someone doesn't feel like work. Where I don't have to explain the context of every story, because they already know the context. Where something happens and I don't have to wonder if this person will understand why it matters. I just know they will. She paused. Adrian was great. He just wasn't that. I stood there in the cold October air outside a wedding reception in Mississauga and understood for the first time, clearly, without the ability to soften it into something easier, that I had been using the friendship as a reason not to say something I had known for at least 2 years. I kept telling myself, I said, that what we had was worth more than what I wanted to say. She looked at me. That saying it would change the math, and the current math was good. I wasn't willing to break something that was working just because I stopped. Started again. I didn't want to be the person who makes a friendship into a problem, because he can't manage his own feelings. Nadia was very still. The string lights behind her were doing the thing where they reflected off the frost on the patio stones and made everything look slightly suspended. You have feelings, she said. I've had feelings for a while. How long is a while? Longer than I'm going to admit to right now, outside in October. That almost made her smile, almost. I turned down a promotion, she said quietly. You said there were other reasons. There were, but that was one of them, which means I've been managing this too, since before you apparently started managing yours. She gave a short, quiet exhale that wasn't quite a laugh. We're ridiculous. We're very loyal to a version of things that was comfortable. That's a generous way to put it. I've been living inside it. I'm allowed to be generous. She looked at me for a long moment. The music from inside the house was audible even out here, a soft, muffled version of something people were apparently dancing to. Through the kitchen window, I could see Nadia's grandmother still at the table, still in the same conversation. Coffee had moved from the floor to a chair and was now on his phone. Normal evening shapes, nothing looking back at us. I'm still moving to Vancouver, Nadia said. I know. In February. That part doesn't change. I know that too. She tilted her head slightly, watching me. So what are you actually saying, Liam? I pulled my hands out of my jacket pockets because keeping them there suddenly felt like I was still managing something, and I was tired of managing things. I'm saying I want to stop treating this like something I need to protect you from. I spent a long time deciding my feelings were a problem I should contain. I'd rather know if there's something else. She was quiet. I know it's complicated with the move. I know February is in 3 months. I'm not saying let's solve the whole thing tonight in your aunt's backyard. I'm saying I don't want to keep not saying it. Nadia looked down at the frost-edged patio stones. Then she looked back at me. I called you from the Calgary interview, she said, when they gave me the offer. Before I called my mom. Before I called my mom. Before I called Sophie, who was going to scream and tell me to take it. I remember you said you needed to talk it through. I knew what I was going to do before I called you. I just wanted to hear your voice while I decided. She paused. I didn't have language for what that meant. I told myself it was just because you're my closest friend and big decisions feel less real until I've said them to you. Was that all it was? No, she said, it wasn't. There it was, small and plain and colder than the October air and warmer than anything I'd felt all year. Okay, I said. Okay, she said. We stood there for a moment, without the weight of the unsaid thing between us for the first time in I didn't know how long, and it felt less like a beginning and more like something settling into a shape it had always been trying to reach. Write in the comments. Do you think we were wrong to wait so long? Or does it only make sense to say something when you finally can't hold it anymore? Sophie appeared at the back door. It is very cold. Why are you both outside? She looked at us. Oh! She took a step back. Oh, okay, good. I'll go. Sophie, Nadia said. No, I'm going. I'm leaving. I'm giving you space. She pointed at us. You're welcome, by the way. I feel that needs to be said. Go inside. Going. She pointed one more time. You're welcome. The door closed behind her. Nadia pressed the bridge of her nose. She's going to be completely unbearable about this. She earned some of it. She absolutely did not. She did a little. Nadia looked at me, and this time the smile reached. Not the polished one she used at family events, the real one, the slightly tired, slightly helpless one that meant she had decided to stop pretending something wasn't true. We went back inside because it was October in Ontario, and outside was a philosophical choice that had limits. The kitchen had thinned out. Nadia's grandmother had finally moved to the living room. Coffee had disappeared somewhere with his phone, and the counter by the sink was clear. Petra materialized briefly to ask if anyone wanted the last of the Nanaimo bars. We took them because we had learned at Nadia's family events that you always take the last of something when offered, because it will not be there in 5 minutes. The reception wound down the way receptions do, slowly and then all at once. Cars pulled out of the driveway. Petra and her new husband said goodnight to everyone twice. Nadia's mother found me near the coat rack and hugged me in a way that lasted slightly longer than usual, and I strongly suspected she had been listening from the kitchen window. But I was not going to confirm that. I drove home on the 401 at midnight with the radio on low and the kind of quiet in the car that comes from something having shifted, not solved, not finished, just finally started. The Vancouver situation was, as Nadia had said, still a situation. February was February. But we had one real dinner in November, not takeout on her couch, not a work lunch kind of thing, but a reservation at a restaurant near Kensington Market that she'd been wanting to try for 2 years. We showed up on purpose, for each other, and sat there for 3 hours talking about nothing in particular, and everything, which was what we always did, except this time neither of us pretended that was all it was. We figured the rest out over the months that followed. Some of it was hard, some of it was less hard than either of us expected. Vancouver was still Vancouver, but Vancouver also has flights, and she had already proven she knew how to call me before she called anyone else. Sophie, for the record, sent us both the same text the Monday after the wedding. It said, "Told you," no capitals, no context, just that. Nadia forwarded it to me with the message, "I hope you're happy." I said I was. She said, "So am I." And that was that, really. Not a big moment, just a small true one, which, if I'm being honest, was the only kind that had ever mattered between us anyway. The night after Petra's wedding, I sat in my car in the parking garage of my building for longer than I needed to. Not because I was upset, just because I wasn't ready to walk into an empty apartment and let the evening become a memory yet. I kept thinking about the Calgary thing. About the fact that Nadia had been offered something real, a promotion, a new city, a clean start somewhere, and she had quietly said no and then never told me, and had kept showing up at my door with faux and furniture opinions and her color-coded everything. I had been right there the whole time and had no idea. That's the part I've been sitting with. Not the romantic piece of it, though that matters. What I keep coming back to is what that kind of decision says about the quality of a person's character. Nadia didn't make that choice loudly. She didn't ask for credit. She just held it privately, the way people with genuine integrity tend to hold the things that cost them something, without making the cost into a performance. I spent 6 years doing something similar, and I don't say that to flatter myself. I stayed quiet, because I convinced myself that protecting what we had was the right thing to do. That part was honest. But there's a version of staying quiet that comes from courage, from genuinely prioritizing someone else's comfort over your own need. And there's a version that comes from fear dressed up as consideration. I was doing both. And for a long time, I didn't want to look closely enough at which one was winning. What finally moved me, standing in that cold backyard in October, wasn't some sudden rush of emotion. It was clarity. Sophie's accidental honesty cut through 6 years of careful management and left me with a very simple question. Was I actually protecting Nadia, or was I protecting myself from the risk of being wrong? The honest answer was both. And the honest answer was also that I'd been using the first one as cover for the second. Seeing that clearly without softening it was uncomfortable. But it was the only thing that made it possible to say what I actually said. There's something I've come to believe about the moments in life that end up mattering. They almost never look like the movies. They're cold and a little awkward, and they happen between moments of eating the last Nanaimo bar and watching someone else's cousin disappear through a door. The courage required isn't dramatic. It's just the willingness to stop being comfortable in the wrong direction and say the true thing in the moment when saying it is still useful. Nadia moved to Vancouver in February. That part didn't change, but between October and February, we had real dinners and long calls, and a kind of honesty that 6 years of very good friendship had somehow not quite made room for. None of it was clean or simple. I'm not sure the good things ever are. What I know is that the two of us were both, in our own ways, trying to be decent to each other. We were both paying attention. We were both, when it finally counted, willing to stop pretending that the careful version of things was enough. That's not nothing. That's actually most of it.